Joining me now is Michael Burt, who is the drummer for a band called Limberlost. They have a great new song out called See What You Want. Welcome to the show, Michael.
Hey, what's going on, Christian?
Not much. Great to get a chance to talk to you. I really like the song. We'll talk about that and what's next for the band. And I have to start with, I swear it's a question I don't ask every band, but sometimes you can kind of piece it together. What does Limberlost mean and how does this name come about?
Well, it's mostly it comes from a legend, so to speak. It's a story about a place, and I think it's like Indiana or something like that. It's a swamp. And there was a story of a guy named Limber Jim, and Limber Jim went on walkabout one day and got lost in the swamp, and then he went through a bunch of self awareness kind of conversations with himself, and finally decided to give up and realize that the world was not up to him, that there were higher powers at play, and he started to trust, and he walked in a straight line and got him followed the light and got himself out of the swamp. So that's kind of a metaphor, kind of about our band a little bit. It's like we're always going through crap, but if we just trust each other and move forward and keep on our path and keep our goals in front of us, we'll make it where we want to go. So it's
Right, exactly. Well, good. I'm glad that it's something that I never would have guessed.
There you go.
It's not one of those like, oh, come on, how do you not know what that is?
Yeah, no. It's kind of weird. It was actually brought into the band room by our guitar because Ricky, he's from Georgia, and his grandma used to scare him all by saying, the woods out behind their house were the Limberlost, and in other words, go get your switch. I got something to show you. Go ahead.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was going to say then the Crystal, she has a connection to it through a story called The Girl of the Limberlost, which is a pretty famous book. And it's about a musician and how he dies and his daughter kind of finds her way through, back into music after the mom kind of makes music unavailable because it killed the dad kind of thing. So There's this overcoming story there. So it's got a lot of stories about overcoming and so it kind of speaks to us in a sense, because we're a ragtag group, man, and we just keep putting one foot in front of the other and hoping that we're doing the right thing.
Right. And reading about the band on your the band's website, of course, which I believe is Limberlost Music. Tell me if I'm wrong, but yeah, well, .com, of course. And that the band was put together in Seattle. Are you from there, or did everybody? You mentioned your guitarist is from Georgia, so did everybody kind of converge there from other parts of the country, or are you actually from that area?
Well, I'm having some weirdness here because somebody's trying to call into me here. They don't know I'm in an interview. So my sound's going in and out, but I was originally from the area, but I moved to California for a while and then moved back. I ran into the guitar player. He had transplanted up from Georgia. He was actually in a band called Finding Favor, which was a fairly famous Christian band that was on the Toby Mac label, and they had done some recording and stuff. And then for whatever reason, he kind of left that deal and resettled himself in Seattle. So we kind of found each other over a Craigslist ad, basically, and we joke about that. But pretty much, I think Brittany, who's one of our newest members, been with us a little over a couple of years. She's from Arizona. Right. Ben from Texas, the bass player. But everybody just kind of converged into this area, and we just kind of all found each other that way.
Well, I love the Craigslist reference, because if you think about it, that's like the early 2000s equivalent of, half of the members of KISS were found through putting out a want ad,
Yeah,
so
exactly.
that was the 70s. And then Craigslist was the, can you play? Let's see.
Right.
Well, so finding yourselves in the Seattle area, we were talking about the name of the band, and I was thinking that obviously there are some great band names that have come out of there. Some of them are incredibly well known, but some of the other good ones, of course, like Mudhoney, Mother Love Bone, Mookie Blaylock, which then turned into Pearl Jam. My favorite, one of my favorite bands from that scene was the Screaming Trees from like 30 years ago now, which is crazy to think about. But what sort of music that people associate with that area do you feel like you were more exposed to because you're from there than maybe it would have been if you'd grown up in, say, Southern California or somewhere like that?
Well, I'm gonna date myself here. I'm more of an early '80s guy. I was playing in the hair metal scene up here back in those days. And kind of the only band that was really kind of cruising up here at that time was probably Heart. And then
Right.
we had Steve Miller, and then Queen's Right came out, in the early '80s and so forth. So it was pretty much that was kind of more of my influence, but for me it was more. There were other things going on, I was really into Zeppelin. I was,
Sure.
the stuff of the time, Van Halen, oh my God, that blew us away, when that came out, but I'm a Tower of Power guy. I love James Brown, I'm pretty eclectic, when it comes to my music influences, but we are a wide range, I guess is what I was going to say, of age groups. So there's different decades that are very influential within the band, um, there's people that kind of grew up in the 2000s, and it's kind of funny when you ask who their favorite guitar player is or who this is, it's like everybody kind of skips what was before them. So, we all have different influences, from a genre standpoint, but we definitely have a lot in common though too. I mean, that's what's really interesting about the group is we all tend to love certain groups and certain styles of music and so forth. So, but it's a wide range of influences. But from the Seattle area, I didn't have a lot because I didn't grow up during the grunge era.
Right.
I was off chasing a family and a career, when all that crap was happening. So, so I didn't really get into that. But I mean, it's you got Soundgarden, you got Alice in Chains, you got like you were saying, Pearl Jam, Mudhoney. I mean, there's some great groups that came out of here in the early, early late '90s, early 2000s. Nirvana,
Yeah, of course. Yeah. No. I mean, there's the ones that all had that level of success, and then the ones that you would have had to actually read the order form from Sub Pop Records that came with your Nirvana album and be like, well, I want to hear the Love Battery album and the Fluid album. And all that, so and it's interesting that you mentioned Heart, because I was going to bring up the fact that Heart, of course, is from that area, because you do have a female vocalist, and I think that musically the sound isn't the same, but I mean, I think Ann and Nancy Wilson just sort of really and they were obviously not the first female singers in any genre of rock and roll, but to have sort of the success that they had, and obviously from other parts of the country, the women that had been in the Runaways, Lita Ford and Joan Jett, but to really sort of build that foundation, I think it's still unusual. Like, when you hear like a song like, oh, there's a woman singing, you might do a double take if, you don't, you're just listening on, I was going to say the radio, but then again, we're talking about being old, but like a random Spotify playlist where they're choosing music for you. And it's talk a little bit about sort of what that gives in terms of a unique sound, having a female singer. And then I also think on top of that, the band has a very full sound, and to me, just enjoying music, not being musically inclined at all, I think having keyboards is just sort of, something that adds a whole level to it. So talk about kind of developing the band's sound over the time that you've been together.
We ran into Crystal, little known fact, but, for those that get to know us, Crystal and Ricky and myself were all part of a worship team. So my wife and I had attended a church, and I saw this little girl with curly hair bounce out and with an acoustic guitar and started singing, and still putting this project together, I nudged over to my wife, and this guy keeps calling in here. Did you lose me?
No, I can still hear you. I don't have your picture, but that's all right. I can hear you. Yeah.
All right, hold on. Trying to get it back up and running here. Oh, there we go.
So you were talking about seeing, I guess it was Crystal at church. It was where you first
So I leaned over and nudged my wife, and I go, "That's my new lead singer." So it was kind of funny because, about a month or so later, I was on the worship team with her, and then I talked to Ricky, and he was him and his family were looking for a new place to land for church, so they ended up. So about a year later, we're kind of on this team of the four. There was a original bass player, Daniel, at the time. And so we were working the worship team, and then on our off weeks, we were developing what would become Limberlost. We were writing our own music and and doing our thing. So we were playing a lot together. And then the band kind of broke up, actually. We just decided it wasn't, we were kind of leaderless at the time. Nobody, because we were all kind of worship leaders, we were all kind of leader types. It was like, nobody wanted to let anybody else lead. So it just there was just no direction to what the project was going to do. And so we kind of decided to split up. But before we split up, we decided to go in and record one of our songs. It was the first song we had that we had written called Thin Clouds. We thought, oh, that's a good song. We got to record this. So we went in and did that. And then out of that recording session, it got released to some of the local stations around here and stuff by by our engineer and a couple other people. And all of a sudden there was like this notoriety thing that started happening. We're thinking, oh, hey, who's these guys? And so we ended up just kind of jumping on back together as a band and going for it. And our bass player immediately quit. And
of course
said, I can't focus on this. This is too much, because he was in charge of everything at church. He was the, I used to tell everybody he was the pastor's wet dream. I mean, he was in charge of every single, squad basically. And so
sure.
he couldn't maintain the aggression that we were going to have to put into the band. So we just started recording our songs, and we got about 3 or 4 into it. And then an opportunity came up to play live, and we needed an actual full-time bass player. And that's when we went out and recruited Ben. So that was kind of the crux. We were a 4-piece for a little while there, but we brought in a keyboard player a couple of times because we had a couple songs that, needed some piano to them and stuff like that. So we had some guest keyboardists. And then another little known fact is our very first keyboard player that ever played live with us was our current keyboard player, Tony. He came and played once with us at a show, and I think he actually played 2 different shows with us over time, but we never actually recruited him. We ended up with a couple others. We went in the studio with a gal named Clarissa, and then we ended up with Raymond Hayden on our first album. And then we decided, and then we added the other singer. So the other thing is that we don't have just one female vocalist; we have 2.
Right. And I believe her name's Brittany, right?
Brittany, yeah. And Brittany is a world-class singer in and of herself. She's classically trained. She's toured Europe as an opera singer. She actually teaches music. She's got a master or a bachelor's degree, I believe, in music from University of Arizona. And so, I mean, she in all rights is just a heck of a singer, just in and of herself. And I have to give her props because she totally supports Crystal as the lead in this band. But she brings a very interesting dynamic to our writing, to our sound. They're just capable. Their voices are so similar in so many ways. It's a beautiful blend. It really blends well, but they also are very unique in their own ways too. So,
listening to
the operating room.
Listening to the newer songs, particularly "See What You Want," the newest song that's out there. I think that both of their voices complement each other well.
Yeah.
And having the 2 female lead singers, obviously, then that circles back to the comparisons of heart. The interesting thing you were talking about, though, you mentioned the song "Thin Clouds," and as I was putting my notes together, I listened to the new song a lot, but I went to the website and I was listening to some other ones, and that one really stood out for me. "Thin Clouds." I thought lyrically, I was interested in what she was singing, but also I found it to be very catchy. Talk a little bit about the writing the music for this band, and then lyrics, if it's collaborative or who really does what.
Cooperative. There's actually 3 at this point. We have 3 lyricists in the band. I write music. I write some of the songs. I actually wrote the lyrics for "See What You Want" and "Thin Clouds." Crystal helped me with getting the last piece of "Thin Clouds" put together, because that was a song Ricky and I had written prior to her joining the band. So that was the first song we actually wrote and first song we recorded. She helped me kind of tie it off with a couple loose ends that I had in it. And then, but Crystal writes a lot of the songs. She's written "Refiner." She brought that into the room. She wrote, "Hands Up." She wrote "Long Shadows." The current one of our newest ones, or 2 of our newest ones actually, that are doing really well out there, which is "Real Thing" and "Good Fight," were both hers. But then Brittany came along, and there's two new songs on our new album that haven't been released yet that she actually wrote. So yeah, it's and what we tend to do is we bring them in, and sometimes it's just a riff that Ricky has, and we build off of it. I think, I want to say Long Shadows and Hands Up were built that way, where we were just jamming a riff, and Crystal started coming up with some melodies and stuff, and we just developed them into songs. Like See What You Want, I kind of finished that in my head and before I brought it into the band room, so it was kind of a complete song. Crystal did the same thing with The Real Thing, pretty much, kind of brought it in. And then we just kind of tinker with it. Everybody tugs at it, pulls at it, puts their own flavor into the parts. Anthony, you talked about keyboards, one of the best keyboard players in the area up here. He's probably one of the most talented people in our band. I mean, he is just an insane keyboard player. and he'll dig at things and stuff, and just come up with some really cool flavors and stuff to put in there. So yeah, it's really fun watching a song come to life within the band, because it just takes on all these different levels as it grows. And we typically don't write songs to record them initially. We write them to perform them, and then we go out and perform them. Like, we got a brand new one that we're going to debut at a show here in a couple of weeks, and we're going to go out and play that thing for a while, and then we'll probably go in and start recording it here in a month or two, and start putting it together. But we'll develop it with some consumer feedback at the same time. So.
Well, yeah, and I think that obviously I can imagine for a band, like, getting to actually perform a song live together repeatedly, you sort of get a feel for, whereas if you initially write to the studio, you're going to probably end up, I think this happens with a lot of bands, where the studio version of something is like, oh, that's not the way I tend to think of that song. I mean, it's the ultimate all-time example is if anybody who ever hears the studio version of Cheap Trick's I Want You to Want Me, the original album cut, you're like, well, that's not what that song sounds like, because everybody thinks of the live one. There's stuff from Phantom Comes Alive, Kiss Alive, these live albums from the 70s. You're like, well, no, the song sounds different. It's not just like the song with people cheering at it in the background. It's like it develops in a different way. So I can see that would actually be so much better for just the way that the band feels about the song. And you mentioned about playing it live. That was sort of what I wanted to ask you, because, we're at a very interesting point here, and as we almost hit the middle of 2021, where a few months ago, I don't know what I was able to really do outside, but then over the weekend, I took my whole family to Disneyland, and I've got a Weezer and Green Day concert at Dodger Stadium in early September, and I'm like, that's 55,000 people, but they tell me it's happening. So, how are things in terms of gigs up in Washington State and the surrounding area? Are you getting out there to play the material? Have you been playing for a little while, or is this new to get back out there and playing in front of people?
Well, we walked into this whole pandemic. It was kind of a weird deal, because we had a plan last year. We had a tour, cross country tour set up. We were going to play at the International Singer-Songwriter Association Awards ceremony in Atlanta, and then we were going to basically tour our way back across the country. We had a bunch of dates set up, and it was looking really good. And then all of a sudden, this pandemic hit. But at the same time, we were finishing the album. We're working with Timothy Eaton, our producer, on another song that hasn't been released yet. So all this stuff was happening, and all of a sudden, boom, everything started to shut off. In fact, it shut off right before we were able to finish The Real Thing, which was our last release we put out off this new album coming up. And we had to actually take all the gear over to Crystal's house, and she recorded her vocal in her clothes closet while FaceTiming our engineer. and so we could get that. And then Brittany and I, braved the COVID and went into the studio and took separate turns and did all the background harmonies and stuff like that. And Crystal actually never heard any of the backgrounds until we actually had the song done. So, because we were in the process of going. So, COVID threw us some curveballs, but we just adapted to it. And my process as a band leader, I, really sat down and started looking at all these things that we were going to start to miss out on, and all these things we'd worked for. And I was like, I have to have a plan here, or I have to have a mantra or a vision. Statement, so to speak. And mine was basically, sooner or later this is going to open up, and when it opens up, the doors are going to open, and the big wave is going to rush through, and everybody, everybody's going to want to get back on board, right? And I said, so our deal is we're going to be on riding that wave when the door opens, not paddling for it. So we kept working. We put out a video. Right. We finished our album. We actually did get out and play. There were places around the country that would allow us to come play. So we did. We got in our truck and we drove and played Salt Lake City. We drove and played Idaho. We went out. We drove all the way to Denver and played Denver. This is all during the pandemic last summer. As long as it was safe and it was allowed, we went out and did it. When most people had hung it up and decided, nope, we got to sit over here and be told what to do or how to feel about it, we just said, screw it, we're going to go do it. And so coming into this year, we were pretty well prepared. We knew that eventually it was going to go up. So we kept planning our future as if it was going to be wide open, because you can always pull back, but it's hard to kickstart something when you have no momentum. So we kept the mental and physical momentum going as much as possible. So to your question, it sucks up here in Seattle right now because there's really no place to play. And it's, we're one of the last states that are going to get their act together as far as opening up, even though things aren't that bad up here. But we do have a couple shows coming up locally that we've been able to, keep on the table and stuff. So we're going to do those. But most of our playing has been out of state. And our whole tour that we have set up for this summer pretty much leaves Washington State and doesn't even touch the West Coast. I had a buddy of mine look at it and he was looking at our tour route and he goes, this looks like the Screw You West Coast tour.
It's funny that you say that because earlier this week, Alice Cooper, one of my favorite performers, announced a tour. He and Ace Frehley, they're playing all over the country except for the West Coast. No California. Exactly. I mean, he lives in Arizona, and it's like, but there's no Oregon, no Washington. I mean, California is good for like 6 dates if your tour, is significantly enough. And and it's just like, but then in the same week, it's like, yeah, but you can, a friend of mine told me that he's going to, I think the Black Crows are playing like an indoor venue, the Forum here in LA. So I understand your amphitheaters and even like stadiums and things that are open air, but I'm like, well, you're there, but I guess just because they sell you tickets doesn't mean it's really going to happen now, does it?
No, we've been, my wife and I have been sitting on Matchbox 21 front row center tickets for 2 years now.
Yeah. And it's always like, well, you could return them and get a refund. It's like, well, no, because eventually that concert's going to happen and I want to have them. And
exactly.
And, I think that's kind of the interesting thing. I mean, I think, California is a little bit more open than those of us who live here expected it to be, but people routing tours weren't expecting it either. So that's why you're seeing like, just like, I mean, you want to talk about a state you can do 6 to 8 dates for. You could go to Texas. There's plenty of places to play in Texas.
Yeah, we're touring Texas in October.
Yeah. So, yeah, exactly. And like I think it already happened, but I remember hearing Sammy Hagar planned a tour of Florida. That like it was like, well, yeah, you might as well. You play where you can. And I think it's interesting because you have some pretty high profile tours that are like, you know what, we're going to wait till next year. And then others just sort of change the routing. So it's great that you're able to get out. But the fact that you have to, travel so far away to do it. But at least there's the options. And, you were talking about getting to play last year over the summer, and some of the musicians that I talked to that were playing, I feel like that, the crowds must have been so glad to be out and doing something just it must have been, no pun intended, just more electric than that setting would have been if you played the exact same day 2 years earlier. It
was more personal. There was more connection because it's like I think in those situations when you're looking down the barrel and you don't see many opportunities, and as either a fan or a musician, that you kind of cherish that moment a little more, because it's like, wow, I looked at Herman's Hideaway in Denver, which is one of the clubs we went and played back there, and I looked back at their calendar and we were about it for like 3 weeks on one side and 4 weeks on the other side. We were the only show that came into that room.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was like, now I know why the capital you build and the equity you build with the promoters and the club owners and stuff like that, where when I said, hey, I want to come back through, it's like, yeah, absolutely, name your day. where it took me 2 years fighting with that guy to get in there to begin with, because we were nobody to them, right? Sure. It's the same thing with Sturgis. We got a whole week. We're playing the whole week at the Knuckle, which is right on the main town, and during bike week, we're there every day, and
great.
But 3 years, I couldn't get anybody to freaking call me back, but because we reached out and were willing and able, a couple places were like really touched by that we would come out in the pandemic and save their ass, so even though we didn't get a gig last year at all, because they didn't have any availabilities, I had 2 clubs reach back out to me, this year, and we were able to secure, a great show,
Well, and that's,
yeah,
that's got to be great. And so you're talking about sort of heading towards getting an album out, and there's a bunch of singles out already that have come out over I don't know, the last year or so. Yep. Is there a firm like, oh, the album's going to come out in this month later in the year, or is it more like we'll see how it goes, and maybe by the end of the year it'll come out?
I'm glad you asked. No, actually, it's very well planned out. We're with Vaughn Artists out here on the West Coast, and they're out of Portland and Tokyo. That's our distribution label. So we've actually put together, we also work with Paul Crosby, who's the drummer for Saliva. So we've put together some a really good plan on this. So actually, the first day we go out on tour is the day the album drops. So we are actually touring that album. It's an actual release the album and tour the album. And so we're doing a whole shebang around that, promoing, some of the singles like See What You Want. We'll be promoing them over the next couple of months. August 6th is the date. That's the date we open up for Tantric in Idaho. And then we'll be on tour for a little over 2 weeks after that. Then we've got a couple breaks back here, and then we go back out again, like I said, to Texas and so forth. But we're also working on brick and mortar type stuff. We've got, as we're doing this, our label's also putting us in record stores and radio spots along the way. So we'll maybe be doing some meet and greets, hopefully in some of these towns at some record stores in the markets that still have that kind of stuff. So just trying to put, we're trying to do something more than the Facebook release. This is what everybody does. They throw the crap up on Facebook, sponsor an ad, and then sit back and wait for everybody to tell them it's cool, and then they forget about it 3 months later, and it's on to the next thing. We don't want to do that. We want to grow this album and let it get out to as many people as possible, and hopefully we'll sell some too.
Well, yeah, and obviously the goal is to get it out there and to grow it. And I think that through no fault of a lot of these bands, I mean, the music industry being what it is, a lot of these labels, they're really just all geared towards like, we're gonna spend a little money on all the pre-orders, and you'll have a band like Judas Priest has their first ever debut #1 the week it comes out because all their fans bought the pre-release, and then on week 2 it still charts, but by the 3rd or 4th week it's like the numbers being sold are so much lower, and and that's a huge international band that doesn't have that. So being a young up and coming newer band, the idea that you could just kind of sit back is it seems like a missed opportunity. So it's great to hear that you're out there playing it and trying to if you're going to be out there, the sort of the old model of like, well, you could do some local radio, you could go to the local record store. I mean, at least bigger cities all have at least the one really good record store,
right?
And
yeah.
I think that it's great to hear that you guys are willing to go out there and push for it, and getting to do interviews like this. I hear a lot of songs that I don't think I would have heard otherwise, and I hear the song that you guys are promoting right now, and of course some of the older ones as well. See What You Want, obviously being the new one, and it's just like, oh yeah, I don't know where people will hear it. So making sure that if you're in that record store, if somebody's going to be going out to the show. And here's the other thing about going to live music that I was thinking when you were talking about it. If you're opening for somebody, people are probably going to come on time for the opener these days, because it's like, God, I haven't been to a concert in like 14 months.
Right.
What am I, do I want to drink beers in the parking lot? I mean, I should really check it out. So no, I'm glad to hear, how dedicated everybody is towards, really just trying to reach people. And yes, of course you would love to sell them, but to make people aware of it, I think is such an uphill battle. And of course, the sort of the other side of that is that at least, the interaction, the engagement with fans is so much better than it used to be. I referenced, the Alice Cooper going on tour. Well, that I got that email directly to me. You didn't have to look through, your weekly, growing up in New York, looking at the Village Voice and like, oh my God, look who's on tour, so you can always let people know. All they have to do is like follow you on some platform or sign up for an email list. And I think that, for the many disadvantages of that, the people who really like you, being able to kind of keep them informed seems like it would be an advantage. And I'm sorry, I think you were about to say something and I went off on that.
Well, no, you brought up being able to do the interviews and so forth. And I think that's really, really important. We've been at this a little while, building this brand of ours, we're going into our 5th year now, which is still pretty young for a band that's, I think, reached as far as we have. But we spend a lot of time developing relationships with people like yourself, getting, not just doing an interview, but then also, getting to know that and supporting what you do as much as you're supporting what we do. And some of those things are starting to come to life now for us. I have a DJ in Detroit who's trying to put us on he's trying to not finance, but he's trying to put together the stuff that we need to get us out there and actually do maybe a 3 or 4 date swing with like Pop Evil or somebody, and then this show we're doing in Wyoming. I love there's a guy, there's a DJ out there that we've been on his show a few times, and it's an internet radio deal, and he's doing his thing, and he just really loves the band. And when I told him we were coming through the area, he goes, "Oh man, you got to do a show here." So they found a venue, they got sponsors, they're rolling out the red carpet. They've already done a radio ad, sounds like monster truck ad kind of thing. Yeah. It's the concert of the summer, Limberlost,
Yeah.
And I'm just like, those are all from those that started with those little submitting a song to a radio or submitting for an interview and all the things, and these relationships build upon themselves. I've got a guy over in the UK right now just send me a bunch of links because they want to get us over there and do some festival tour, kind of stuff. And he's sending me links to all these people. And, I'm like, those things don't just happen. They don't just fall in your lap. It's time spent developing intentional relationships and being mutually beneficial to each other in the industry. I think that's really important because there's so much out there now with the internet that, it's hard not to just get caught up in the wash,
Yeah, right. Exactly. And the difference, of course, being that 30 years ago, if you were going to play in Europe, you would have to, be on like a huge label who really wanted to support the band. And it's great to hear sort of that networking that works in, any other industry being so much more important. One of the things I wanted to circle back before we wrap up, because you were talking about how Ricky had previously, I think you said it was Ricky had previously played in a Christian rock band, and the fact that the band was kind of put together in church. Was there ever a moment where there was a thought of possibly, going the Christian rock route? What was there an incarnation where maybe some of the music had that tone? Or, somebody who has only casually heard some Christian rock, a lot of times, if you listen to the lyrics, it's like, okay, they're either singing about a boyfriend or girlfriend, or they're singing about Jesus. It's a lot of similar emotions that you're singing about. It wasn't that big of a leap for Creed to go over to mainstream,
Right. Well, it's a great question, because when I was in a worship team down in Temecula, California. That's kind of where I got back into music. And I was working with some, pretty stout guys, because they, down in the LA area, there's a lot of musicians, and it's kind of like Nashville. Everybody's awesome, And and I was playing with this guitar player / bass player, and he is the uncle of Sonny from POD, and so I got exposed to that whole concept of crossover. That because they were originally a Christian rock band.
Sure. Yeah.
And then Switchfoot was the same thing. And so that all developed out of that same area. And so when I moved up here, I always had this idea that, I love doing the Christian music. I love doing the worship music. I really enjoyed that, but it was a different kind of deal. That was for church. It was for purpose. But what I always found was interesting is that, good music is good music.
and you can play that for anybody. And it's even better when you have like a song that's maybe got a message in it or something like that. And if it's a well-written song, the listener puts the meaning to it. Okay.
Yeah.
I believe that. I believe that, if I'm telling you what to think, then I'm not letting you own the song. If when I'm done with the song and the first time you hear it, you can claim ownership of it, then I think I did my job, as a songwriter. And, so we started writing these songs and it was like the idea is like, we didn't want to pigeonhole ourselves. I have a good friend of mine named Ron Reinhardt, and he's the lead singer of a thrash metal band called Dark Angel, really big band. They play all over the world. Yeah, you know there. He's like my neighbor, and we actually go to church together and stuff. And you wouldn't, you look at Ron and you look at what he sings and where he's from and all that, and you'd be going, there's no way that guy's a Christian, Yeah. But he is, and we were talking one time, and him and I were doing an interview up here with another outfit, another podcast, and he was talking. He goes, "Well, why does it have to be called Christian rock?" He goes, "We don't call it heathen rock. We don't call it devil. It's like there's no label on it. It's just." He goes, "I wouldn't, because he had a Christian rock band called Oil for a while, and he goes, but I never pigeonholed myself because now it means if you call it Christian rock, then that means it's only for Christians."
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point.
And it's like, so why label yourself that way? So when people ask us, are you a Christian rock band? I say, well, some of our earlier songs took that tone on because we were writing from that place. There was 3 or 4 of us, and we were all serving as a worship team. But, now we're just a band that has a rock band, but that has some Christians in it, because we also have a pagan, we also have an agnostic. We aren't, this isn't about religion. It's like, it's like politics. It's not, none of that matters in our group. We're about music and, serving the song. And if we can make people happy, that's what it, with our music, then that's what matters to us. And if there's a message in there that you take on, when I wrote the song Babylon, if I told you where I was when I wrote that song and what I was thinking, you wouldn't even see it the same way, probably, But I've had people come up to me that have a totally opposite viewpoint of what they think I was thinking when I wrote that song, but it makes them happy and they own it, So I just keep my mouth shut. It's like, nah, I know why I wrote the song, but what do you think about it?
Yeah. Earlier this year, I was lucky enough to get a chance to interview Don McLean because American Pie, I guess, turned 50. And I said to him that I appreciate the fact that you don't tell people what it meant to you when you wrote it, because then you're taking away from them what it might mean to them. And especially a song as iconic that's been around as long as that, everybody takes away what they want the song to mean. And, I think that, for artists who have there's the song that's like, I mentioned the Black Crowes before. She Talks to Angels is about a very specific woman that Chris Robinson knew. You have an occasional song. It's like, well, this is about that. I like when you don't tell us what it's all about. It's like, well, yeah, what does it mean to you? Then that's what it means. And that was like sort of one of the more infuriating things about the advent of the music video, because suddenly that's what the song was about. Like what happened in that video. And it's like, well, it's not about that at all if you just listen to it.
Right.
So I think it's great to leave it open-ended. And if somebody comes from a place of faith and they feel like that's what, any given song is about, well, that's great for them. But if somebody else, see what you want, they can see what they want in that song. So it kind of works out perfectly, Well, Michael, I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me. Limberlost is the band, Limberlost Music. And you mentioned you've got some dates coming up, not out here on the West Coast, but there are 40. Well, I'm going to assume you're not going to Alaska or Hawaii either. So there's 45 other states. Yeah. But if somebody emails you and they can set up a gig, in Fairbanks, Alaska, why not?
Hey, I've been to several cities in Alaska, and in fact, my keyboard player Tony, he actually started his music career up there in the bars of Alaska. You got to be a pretty tough hombre to play up there.
Yeah, well, yeah, but I think that on the one hand, if you got it all together and the band is tight and sounding good, I think that they would be very appreciative of like, look, they're here,
right?
And there's always a level of that. But so throughout some of the other 45 states, and hopefully. You mentioned there's some gaps in the schedule, so maybe as the world sort of reawakens a little bit more, maybe you can plug in some other stuff and just go to limberlostmusic.com. for all of that. And you said August 6th. Is that the
August
album
6th.
Release date?
Yep.
And what's the? I meant to ask, what's the name of the new album?
It's actually named after the title track, the video we just put out, produced by Timothy Eaton. It's called Good Fight. We just put out. It's kind of our swan song kind of deal. It's a 6.5 minute deal. We just put out a video to it. It's gotten, been nominated for several awards. It's won a few awards. Great tune. Crystal wrote that song. It's one of those where you'll watch the video and I can guarantee you one thing: you'll watch the video and whatever you think the song's about, it plays to that video. And it's what we were feeling at the time we made the video, but that is not why the song was written. but yeah, so the album is called Good Fight. It's a very interesting, if you've listened to our volume 1, if you go through volume 1, and that is an anthology of songs we just kind of wrote. Sure. And we were kind of going down a certain vein. This album is very different. It's got some covers on it. It's got 2 covers on it. We've already released Jolene. That was released last year. And it's also got a couple rock songs. You've got See What You Want on there. And then we've got a song we wrote that was a collaboration with a late songwriter, Wayne Perry. He wrote Indian Outlaw for Tim McGraw. His son actually sent us a song, and we redid it pretty much and turned it from a country song kind of into a dark rock song. That's called Setting Sun. So was a departure for us. We've got a duet on there that nobody's heard yet. It's a piano duet with the 2 girls, which will be kind of an interesting departure, a little treat. And then we've done 2 songs with Timothy, and we've done another song that is a Pretender song that we redid with him. That's got some special task behind it that I won't be able to talk about for a while yet. But and then we've got our Stranglehold. Brittany wrote a song called In the Garden. We recorded it live in the studio on 1 take, no click, and it was so magical we just kept it. And it's got a 3.5 minute, Ted Nugent style jam at the end of it.
Awesome.
It's just a hodgepodge of who we became over these last couple of years, and we're really excited about it because I think it's really going to take people on a journey. You asked me earlier a question about musical influence, and I tell people, I said, if you wanted to pigeonhole us, a lot of people like to say, well, it's like Heart because you got the 2 girls.
Yeah, of course.
From Seattle. I would put us more in the vein of being more Fleetwood Mac-ish. Just because there were a lot of different songwriters that contributed to that, what they were. And I'm not saying we sound anything like them or write anything like them. I'm just saying it's more of that approach.
And hopefully you don't all hate each other because
no. See, that's the cool thing. It's like we're not looking for our escape hatches or anything like that. We're very family oriented, and we are excited about what we're doing in our future, and we're super stoked that people like yourself will take time to recognize us and talk to us and help us get the word out, because we think we're having a good time, and we think we got something special, and we'd like to continue to share it with the world.
Yeah, and I'm happy to be able to share it here. And obviously, as the album comes out and there's more songs, always happy to do more. And when you do end up playing on the West Coast, I will, be looking for those email updates that I referenced earlier. Limberlost music, though, for everybody who wants to find out more. And August 6th. Thank you so much, Mike. I do really appreciate you not just taking the time, but being so generous with your time. And hopefully we get to catch up a little bit down the road. That's all the time we have for now. Thank you to Mike. And of course, we will see you next time on the Bladtcast.